In this video, we will show you how to replace your rear shocks on this Ford Fusion. You'll have one of these on each side of your vehicle located behind your rear wheels. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing you need to do is safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so your wheel's off the ground. Once you've done that, continue on to removing all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts and we can get the wheel off of here. Continuing from here, we're going to apply light support underneath the rear control arm. We don't necessarily need to jack it up, we just want to make sure it is held in place. A quick note, when replacing the shock, you will have to remove the shock mount at the same time. It's a good idea to replace both of these at the same time. Let's start by removing the lower shock from the lower control arm. Looking all the way down in here, you can see 2 15mm bolt heads, and if you were to look underneath the lower control arm, you're going to find a 15mm nut for each of these mounting bolts. I'll just use my wrench down along the bottom hardware. Okay. There's our mounting nut. Mounting bolt. Let's get this other one out of here. Now we can follow the rear shock all the way up to its upper mounting point. As for removing the upper mount from the body of the vehicle, you'll find you have 2 18mm headed mounting bolts. Remove your shock from the vehicle. Now this will be easiest in the vise because we need to separate the rear shock from its mounting point. To do this, we want to make sure we're holding on to the top of the shock, right up along this very tip of the stud. In the center, you're going to find a 15mm mounting nut. To be able to remove this, I'm using a 15mm wrench that has this drop down. That's going to make it so it can go right into this slot here, holding onto the nut. We'll continue on with holding the tip of the actual shock itself. Now we can start turning the nut counterclockwise and removing the shock from the mount. It's getting a little bit tight here. I'm just going to work it in. As you can tell, we're getting pretty close here. It's getting a little easier to remove the mounting nut as well. Remove the mounting nut. And now we can remove the shock from the upper mount. There it is, friend. A quick inspection and we'll set this aside. Now, assuming you're reusing your original mount, you want to make sure you clean and inspect it. For this, I'm just going to use a wire brush. We'll give it a quick cleaning. Okay friend, let's prepare our brand new shock for installation. For shipping, you're going to find it comes with this plastic strap. We want to carefully depress this. We can remove the strap. At this point, we'll let this completely expand. And then continue on by pressing this down and re-releasing it several times, charging the rear shock. Now typically along the bottom of the mount there should be a jounce bumper and a protective cover. If it's still on your shock, just go ahead and pull it off of there. A quick inspection to make sure it is reusable. This looks fine. And now we can take that jounce bumper and we're going to slide it right up inside the port of the lower portion of this mount. You may have to twist it a little bit. There we are. Just double check, make sure that's properly secured. Now we can install our rear shock. We're going to take this and bring it straight up through the center here, up through the center port. Just have to get everything lined up properly. Once you have it in place, continue on with your mounting nut up along the top here. All right, let's see if it's the same size. No. Let's just get our tools on here. Turning this nut clockwise while holding the center shaft still. Okay, right there's bottomed out. A quick note, you should always replace the upper shock nut whenever you're servicing the upper mount. Now that we have that snug, let's torque this to 22 foot-pounds. Now we can get this over to the vehicle. Okay, let's get this in place. Start bringing this down into position. Align the upper mounting points and we'll start in the mounting bolts. As for the mounting hardware, it's always a good idea to use just a tiny bit of blue thread locker on the threads of all of the mounting bolts. With the upper hardware started in, we can continue on to the lower mounting hardware. Once again, I'm using blue thread locker. We'll take each of our 2 bolts, slide them down through the shock and through the lower control arm, and start on each of our 2 mounting nuts. If you find that the mounting bolt does not come down far enough, but the other one does, we'll start on the mounting hardware here. We can snug this up. It'll draw the next one down, and we can start on that as well. Now we can see some threads. Let's get this nut on here. Torque each of these to 35 foot-pounds. Now let's move to the upper mounting hardware. For the upper hardware, snug it up, torque it to 66 foot-pounds. Remove the support from under your suspension. Now it's time to install the wheel. We'll get this in place, start on all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts. Once they're bottomed out, we can get the wheel safely on the ground, torque each of these to 100 foot-pounds. With the wheel safely back down on the ground, we're going to torque each one of our lug nuts in a crisscross manner to 100 foot-pounds. torqued.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.